I'll start the recording. And I'd like to thank first of all Professor Tomasz Zarebski from the University of Lower Silesia. Tomasz is an associate professor in this department in Poland. He earned his academic degrees, the MA and PhD, plus the habilitation in philosophy at the University of Wrocław. He deals mainly with the philosophy of language and its connection with cognitive sciences, but a part of his research concerns also the theory of argumentation, theory of rationality, pragmatism, and neopragmatism. He's also interested in the philosophy of education, as well as in interdisciplinary projects on philosophical ideas in children's literature. Welcome, Tomasz, at the Open University of Cyprus, and you are hosted by the Master's Program in Continuing Education and Lifelong Learning, and interdisciplinary masters offered by the Open University of Cyprus. A number of visiting academics have visited us and gave lectures as part of the Erasmus program. Welcome in Cyprus and at the Open University. It's over to you, Tomasz, to introduce yourself and maybe tell us a few things about what you are going, the lecture, what it's going to be about tonight.
Thank you so much, Maria. And first of all, I would like to thank both you and Eleni and Erato for arranging the visit and accepting my offer to come here. And it's a great honor for me to speak to you now. I come from Poland. Maybe I should add that I'm the editor-in-chief of the international journal, Interdisciplinary Studies in Education and Society, and I invite you to submit your papers to us. But today I will be speaking mostly about research ethics in social sciences. So maybe I'll start the presentation and we'll be explaining as we go along everything. So the title of the presentation is Research Ethics in Social Sciences, Main Issues and Concerns. Let us start with the basic question. What is research ethics? We know that ethics is much broader field of reflection, yeah? But here it is to say that research ethics concerns mainly research, but that research which involves human subjects or human participants. This is a traditional paradigmatic view. Today we also know, we are aware of the thing that it also comprises animals, yeah, animals ethics, but also environmental ethics. So, as a matter of fact, it doesn't have to deal with human subjects only, but also with fauna and even flora, climate issues, and so on. But here we'll restrict ourselves mainly to human subjects and human participants, because this is what social sciences are about. And now there are three objectives in research ethics. First is to protect human participants. Here a sort of comment should be added, because in this research process, we deal with two sides, in a sense. Yeah? We have the side of researchers, the side of participants, and not always the interests of researchers are the same as interests of participants. Yeah? So, in research ethics, we have to sort of balance between these two sides just to harmonize it. Of course, we as researchers, we care about what we do. We want to discover something new. In every research project application, they asked us for writing what new issues, what new discoveries we are expected to do, to show, and so on. So something new, hidden from public so far, is important. But to discover something new, we sometimes go deep into a sort of intimate sphere of participants. So we can violate their intimacy, for example. That's why we have to do something about it. So we have a gap, yeah, between the interest of researchers and the interests of participants. Now, in the middle is a place for research ethics. And now the question arises, what has the final say about what's proper, what's good, what's recommended, and what's not? And here in the gap is a field for ethical boards or university ethical committees. Yeah, so they have to assess and sort of say that this is good, this can be implemented in practice in the research projects. That's why it is important. So, well, we have three objectives, as I've said. First one is to protect these human participants. So, I mean, the motivation behind this objective is that science is not self-standing. Science is not the most important thing in the world. We shouldn't do science with some victims, you know. We shouldn't pay human participants' interests for scientific progress. Well, but let's move to the second objective. The second objective is to ensure that research is conducted in a way that serves interests of individuals, groups, or society as a whole. Well, what does it mean? Individuals, groups, or society as a whole. Now, we can easily imagine that we project some research which would be, for example, sexist in its spirit, yeah? Or racist, or nationalistic, or we can substitute, we can add something else here, yeah. And now we as researchers and the committee in terms of ethical boards, they have to think and assess if it is good in general, yeah, if doing this will be for benefit of individuals, groups, society in the long term. Yeah? Not every research is worth undertaking, and we have to be aware of this, and the body, such as the ethical board, has to be not only aware but also capable of assessing it and letting it go, or not, or not giving permission to that. Well, let's go further. The third objective is to examine specific research activities and projects for their ethical soundness. For example, management of risk. If in a particular research it is just good managed, which means the risk is minimized as far as possible. Next thing is protection of confidentiality. If it is declared properly, and if it is insured, so to say. Next, the process of obtaining informed consent. If it is proper, I mean the process properly designed. So these are rather specific issues to be discussed by professors from ethical boards. Let me tell you some anecdotes about protection of confidentiality. Well, because in Poland we have like here we have a radio programs and broadcasts, and we have one in which a journalist talks with scientists, different academics, and one day that journalist invited an academic, a woman working within legal studies, yeah, and she was working on a very difficult, very controversial issues, in which, in doing this research, she had to get an access to secret confidential files from court. And she obtained such agreement, and she received by post files from court of justice. And now, to protect confidentiality, she was supposed to work first in the university, second, to keep all these files locked in a safe somewhere, in a very safe place, and she was supposed to be the only one who had an access to these files. And what happened? The journalist asked her, just as they go along, he asked her, well, it must have been hard work, a lot of files to read. And what she answered, well, it wasn't so hard because my mother helped me in that, and also my sister. Then the journalist asked, well, but did your mother and your sister have permission to look into it? And then she she got to realize that it was sort of faux pas. It was both a mistake to say it in public and to let her family know confidential secret files from the court. So, well, on the level of declaration, everything seems to be understandable, okay. But in practice, we sometimes forget about it, even if we are good scientists. Well, but let's go further. Well, ethical issues often concern vulnerable persons, which may include children, of course, persons with developmental or cognitive disabilities, persons who are institutionalized, which means prisoners, people in so-called elderly people's homes, and so on and so on. Sometimes the homeless or those without legal status, which is a topical issue today because of immigrants and so on. Well, but sometimes the ethical issues are affected by some more global or general problems, which may comprise, for example, the conduct of research in developing countries, the protection of privacy in the light of advances in technology and internet capabilities, and so on. And again, people who are supposed to help you in deciding what's worth undertaking, what's worth conducting, and what should be, in a sense, corrected, are people working or serving in research ethics boards, committees, and they have been established in many countries, I'm sure, both in Poland and in Cyprus and in Greece and so on. Now, the question of risk. An important issue that arises in the ethical review of social sciences and humanities research is risk of harm. And there can be 5 sorts of harm that may occur in the humanities and social sciences, which means physical harm, social harm, psychological or, let's say, emotional harm, but also, fourth, financial harm, and fifth, legal harm. Let's discuss them shortly, one after another, step by step. So, physical harms, it might seem that they occur mainly in medicine and bioscience, when, for example, people are given a drug for which little information is known, or being given a well-known drug for a new use. And we can easily imagine that taking some unknown drugs may be of risk if we don't know effects, side effects. Then we can become sort of victims. But physical harm doesn't have to deal only with medicine and this sort of experimentation, vaccinations, and so on. If you remember, for example, Zimbardo, a prisoner experiment from psychology from 1970s, as far as I know, you can easily know that physical harm is also at stake in such experiments. But also when we do research in the groups of people where violence is widespread, in sort of or so-called dysfunctional families, research between inmates, yeah, prisoners, and so on. Then, here the research or revealing the one who's taking part in the research may give rise to some physical violence. So it has to be taken into account. Next, social harms. They may include having something about a participant, I mean information about a participant, published without prior consent, and the participant, as a result, being embarrassed or marginalized by the exposure to these views, opinions, or attributes. So you can imagine, for example, that you are interested in questions of, say, sexual abuse, yeah? And information given is confidential. If it's no longer confidential, it is revealed to others, then a participant, say, it might be a woman, a wife of a husband, who is really envious of his wife, and so on. So this is social harm, but we can also detect many other situations and aspects. Next, the third is psychological or emotional harms. Maybe it is much easier to detect, yeah, because they may result from someone being deceived in research, or from being asked to recall or recount traumatic or difficult experiences without adequate preparation or counsel. So here, especially when it comes to recounting traumatic or difficult experiences, what can we do to minimize risks? We can just ask or just arrange our research so as a psychologist be present while doing this research in order to help people in need, maybe temporary, maybe of course it's not a typical therapy, but ad hoc help given to these people. So when considering research projects, ethical boards take into account these things and often ask people for ensuring the presence of a psychologist. Good. The fifth sort of harm is financial harm. Here, they may come from having participants' employment security placed in jeopardy because of participation in a research study. But this is one aspect. Yeah. So I mean the aspect that let's say you lead an interview with people from an institution or from an organization, and they reveal you some information which is not comfortable, not expected by the boss of the people you're speaking to. Yeah? So in a revenge, the boss of your participant could do something about something like withdrawing subsidium or whatever. Just in effect, they they have financial harms. So this is one aspect. But another aspect is that, for example, sometimes you need a very long interview with someone. Yeah, and imagine you are a teacher and a researcher wants you to take part several times in 3 hours interview and so on. It seems that it's not fair that you as a researcher you should offer some payment, some money to these people, yeah? Because they devote their time for maybe for working, maybe for family, yeah, but they put aside their family, work, or whatever, and go to you to speak about your research, to help you make progress in your studies. So it's not fair if you have such a possibility. If you have a research grant, it's always good to allot some money for such aims, objectives. And finally, we have legal harms. And they may result from the exploration or exposure of participants' involvement in illegal practices. So that may be, for example, people working illegally in black, so-called. We call it in Poland and in German, for example. So that's, but illegal, maybe so-called illegal immigrants, maybe something else in illegal practices. Yeah. And now you have a dilemma, or maybe, well, in some minutes I will take about dilemmas, but now let's say that you have to to play by the books and to be okay, so be confidential, yeah, about this. But you can imagine legal harms. So all these 5 kinds of harms are taken into account when considering ethical worth of projects. And now, mostly research projects in the social sciences and humanities, they are of minimal risk of harm. Yet the researchers should, minimal, which means not so big as in medicine, for example, yeah? But the researchers should attend to risk of potential harms that do exist. And when you prepare an application for ethical board, ethical committee, you have to describe what are possible risks, yeah? And what to do to minimize them. Now, how to assess it? Risk of harm should be considered in a contextual manner, yeah? Which means that there is no simple solution for every case, for every context. That's why we need ethical committees. Every text is different in a sense and has to be scrutinized by professors from ethical committees separately. Next, it must be considered against the potential for benefit to individuals and society in all types of research. What does it mean? In a research, we have to weigh things. On the one side, we have risks. I have told a lot about it a minute ago. But on the other hand, we have benefits, potential benefits. Yeah? And for every field of science to make a progress, it is taking a risk. But so without risks, there is no progress, we can say. But to take a risk, to risk something, has to be in the context of some good, well-justified, expected benefits. So when you prepare ethical applications, you have to clarify the potential benefits from your research. Yeah? And then it is to assess if the benefits expected is so big that we can take a risk. Of course, every risk has to be minimized, yeah, but still there exists some risks. Good. As I said, risk of harm will always be present to some degree. So we cannot get deprived of that. Risk is always at stake. But taking a risk has to be in the perspective good scientific benefits. The burden rests with the researcher, which means you, as researchers, you decide what to do, what's good, how to arrange things, but the final say is on the ethical boards within institutions. And here we have to add, we have a proportional approach to risks. What does it mean? In philosophy, we have in ethics, in a sense classical, coming from Jeremy Bentham or John Stuart Mill, if you remember them. It is called utilitarianism or consequentialism. Here we have to we do sort of mathematical calculations. Of course, it's not so easy, and it's not so mathematical. But we have risks, we have benefits, and we have to count somehow. What's better? If the risks, if we have a lot of risks, but poor benefits, the research is not worth undertaking. If we have equal benefits and equal risks, it's controversial. It's better not to bother people, not to drag them to research if the benefits are not so big. So it's always good. It's always better than the benefits be bigger than risks. A bit, but more benefits. And this is called a proportional approach to risks. Well, and now I would like to tell you about 3 problems, because what I have said so far, it's it's basic. I agree, but I would like to emphasize it because from my practice as a teacher, I know that these basics are often forgotten. People do not remember about it, so they usually focus on a very particular, specific, methods, on details. But sometimes they've forgotten about the general background which is really, really important, and different application forms in ethical committees, boards, they have specified in different points. For example, risks, minimizing risks, benefits, and so on, in order for the committee to be capable of issuing a verdict, to judge it. Well, but now I would like to say that it is not always simple. As a matter of fact, it is complex matter, and I would like to mention or to shortly discuss three problems in the Polish context concerning research ethics. The first one I named confidentiality versus obligation of reporting. Yeah? On the one hand, we have to keep confidentiality, but we also act, we do our activity within a legal context, legal framework. Yeah? And some legal regulations, they oblige us to report something to the police and so on. And for example, the Code of Criminal Procedure in Poland, it says that upon learning that a crime prosecuted ex officio has been committed, everyone has a social duty to notify the prosecutor or the police. The term used means that this is a moral obligation of every law-abiding person. Since it is a moral obligation, social, and which means moral, yeah, not legal obligation, there is no punishment for its violation, which means failure to report a suspected crime. So there is no punishment, yeah, but there are some exceptions. So I will be punished only in cases when I know about them and not report them. What are these cases? Well, espionage, piracy, not internet piracy, but in the sea, yeah, murder, assassination of the president, some things like that, yeah. And now, what happens? And it actually happened to my student, to one of my students, when you, for example, do some research with children, not very little children, but children, you lead some interviews with them, and you get to know that something wrong is happening in their families. Yeah? Are you required or obliged to report it or not? Yeah. Of course, it's not an assassination of the president, is not coup d'etat. So maybe I'm not legally obliged to do this, but as a researcher, I should be a responsible person. So moral or social obligations are also important for me. Yeah. So what should I do? What happened to one of my students? She did a research, and it was research about relations between bad effects in learning and families, social situations. And she interviewed two boys whose father had just come back from prison after 12 years of being institutionalized in this prison. And for some reasons, the father woke up at night, for example, at 3 o'clock. Yeah? And the father had nothing to do at night, so he woke the boys to talk to them. Yeah? At night, at 3 o'clock, 3 a.m. Yeah? He talked to them about life, about whatever. Yeah? But as a result, they were very tired. The boys were very tired at school. They couldn't remember anything, and their learning effects were very poor. Yeah? And now, is it a crime or not? Should she have reported it to the police or not? How was she sure about the truth, yeah, about the situation, and so on and so on? But, well, we have law, and on the other hand, we have, for example, another code of ethics. They say, for example, that the respondent has the right to confidentiality and anonymity during the survey. Another paragraph says that we have to do everything with the focus on the welfare of the respondents. But what's the welfare? Yeah? What would be better, to report it to the police, or but in which case the parents' agreement for the children's participation in the research would have probably been withdrawn. So that would be the end of the research. But also the father would take some revenge on the children. Yeah. So it was a big dilemma for my student. And well, what one of the most important codes on children's participation in research in Poland says is here in point 5. If in the course of the investigation, the investigator obtains information that the child is a victim of a crime which has not been disclosed, takes intervention. Yeah? But what sort of intervention? What does it mean? Reporting? Maybe reporting to the head of the school? It's not clear, and it's, I mean, a burden on the researcher to do something about this. But actually, there is no clear hint here what to do. Good. The second problem is a problem of another of my students. Well, because generally we require informed written consent when doing research. But she, I mean my student, she conducted research within Gypsy community in Wrocław. In this community, people didn't speak well Polish, and they were very afraid of bureaucracy. You know, they were scared when they saw some documents written, signed up, and so on. So probably they would not agree to take part in the research, but I mean, if they were asked, or if they had been asked to sign up something, yeah. And in this way, I think, and my recommendation was just to obtain oral consent, yeah, because there was no sense to ask people to do that. And maybe I would mention the third problem. The third problem is more general, and as a matter of fact, it is not directly tied with human subjects, yeah, because it's about politics. It's about Polish politics, but it may be referred to every country, I think, in some circumstances, of course. In 2018, in Poland, the government issued a regulation concerning institution of national remembrance. We have such an institution in Poland. I'm not sure about Greece, about Cyprus, about other countries, but we have, which is the mere fact is very controversial, but it's another issue to be discussed. And in 1918, for some months, a law existed, a regulation followed as follows. An article provides for the punishment of imprisonment up to 3 years or a fine for whoever publicly and contrary to the facts attributes to the Polish nation or state responsibility or shared responsibility for Nazi crimes committed by the German Third Reich, or for other crimes constituting crimes against peace, humanity, or war crimes, or otherwise grossly diminishes the responsibility of the real perpetrators of such crimes, and so on. Well, maybe it is difficult at first sight, yeah? But we have to see that the government imposed a law for scientists, especially historians, yeah, working on history, that they cannot say anything wrong about Polish people from the Second World War, especially about Polish-Jewish relationships. And now, of course, this law was withdrawn after several months, and strong criticism from Israel, from Polish institutions and American and so on. It was a great buzz and mess about it. But what do researchers have to do about it? Should they subdue to the law or do their work? So it's also on them. It's always on them to decide. Yeah. I referred to the Polish context, of course, but before coming to Cyprus, I have also read a book about a very, very difficult Cypriot history. But I think every country has some difficult moments. Huh? So the issue arises, the question, yeah, should we be truthful or lawful in a sense, in case the law is not fair. Good. Here you have references, links, and papers I use when preparing the research. And I'm sure you're aware that it's not finished. You know that the questions and problems, there are plenty of them. But I liked to say only what I have just said here. So I think it's time to finish now. So thank you very much for your patient attention and attendance, and thank you so much. Good. Of course, if you have questions, comments, I'm ready and open to listen to it and to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for the thought-provoking presentation. It was very interesting, and lots of issues have been raised for all researchers in social sciences. So thank you for this. I'm sure that participants, especially PhD students, who are many of them attending this presentation, will have questions. If you agree, I will switch off the recording now so that the floor is open and students can ask